Let's jump to this story. Here's one. This headline is not sensationalized. From the Post-Millennial, Arizona rancher charged with murder of Mexican man was, quote, hunting migrants with AK-47, prosecutors. Prosecutors allege that Kelly hunted the group of men with his gun and made numerous alterations to his story when he later spoke to law enforcement. So you may have heard this story. This guy, George Allen Kelly, 73, is being charged with murder because a guy who was on his property was shot. They say he did it. It was an illegal immigrant with numerous felony crossings, I guess. And the issue now apparently is they're saying he hunted these migrants down to kill them. Yeah. What I find strange is that Arizona, I'm pretty sure, is a defensive property state, meaning you can kill someone to defend your property. Like if someone is about to cross onto your property, my understanding is that you have a right to use lethal force if they don't stop. So what's strange about this case is that here's a guy who's on his own property. Clearly someone's breaking the law. They end up shot and dead. But this guy gets arrested. I'm wondering, how does that make sense?
Well, he was trespassing, right? I mean, that's
in the country and the land.
Right. Well, and that's what I Vivek Ramaswamy just announced for president, and he talks about the difference between immigration and illegal immigration, or people coming across the border illegally. And I think that's the crux of the matter here. Is this guy, he's crossed the border illegally, and then he's crossed into somebody's property illegally, right? And this guy's defending his property. He has a right to do that, as opposed to somebody who goes through INS and goes through the process to get the green card and does all of that. And I think that underscores what we were just talking about the need to be precise in our language, right? And that's why I kind of like Vivek and him coming out and running for president now, but it is to be precise in our language and understand what is happening here is why you see so much confusion about situations like this. You know, and the media just seems to play into that.
This guy says that he just fired warning shots and there's no evidence that his bullets hit the guy, which to me sounds like he might be telling a lie, that maybe he did go out there to shoot the trespassers, but now he's afraid that if he says it out loud, he'll go to jail for sure. So he changed his story. But when you change your story, then you look like a liar. That's kind of what I'm looking at the path of this situation at the moment.
I think the Biden administration and Democrats want more illegal immigration for a variety of reasons. One, so they can increase the population in their states. They're bringing these people in, putting them on planes and flying them to swing states and blue states. And they also want the short-term economic demand. Bringing in a whole bunch of people and putting them in cities will create temporary short-term demand, followed by stagnation and economic crisis. But that short-term gain looks good for them on paper. They can use it to get reelected. And the long-term gain is bringing in a bunch of people who will increase the census numbers, giving them more electoral college votes and congressional seats. So when a guy who lives there says, hey, get off my property, they're coming right for me, they go, this guy needs to be made, we need to make an example of him so that people don't screw with our agenda. You take a look, was it for McAllen, Texas? Is that where it's at? Where under the bridge, they had all those people? The Biden administration clearly is happy with what's going on. People talk about the southern border and Biden letting us down or failing or whatever. And it's like, no, he's doing exactly what he intended to do the whole time.
This is 100% by design. This is the intent of the Democrats. They have had full authority to do something for 2 years. They have done nothing. They did nothing during the Obama administration. This has been the Democrats' plan for the better part of the past 20 years to have cheap labor be imported into the country. It's completely clear. I can't take anyone that argues against that seriously.
It's been going on for 250 years, dude. The southern states imported cheap labor through the African slave trade. And wanted to use those numbers to pad their stats.
Bro. Oh, yeah, they did. Bro.
Okay,
brother.
All right. It's different stuff.
They had
it is.
They
true.
wanted to use those numbers to inflate their stats.
You can say truthfully that bringing slaves in was quote unquote cheap labor, but migrants coming here is not the same as slavery. Yeah, migrants are coming here of their own volition. Like they're walking, like they want to do it. Like there weren't a lot of people that were in Africa that were like, I'm going to go to America and be a slave.
It wasn't.
Like, they weren't running out and jumping on the slave ship.
Right. It's definitely worse. The slave trade
as soon
was
as
worse.
Biden got elected, or it looked like he was going to be elected and become president, you had a mass migration from Central America all the way up through, because They knew that they were going to be allowed to come through, and before that, you had to remain in Mexico.
They had shirts that said, "Please let us in, Biden," or whatever.
Yes.
Right.
Remember that one?
Yeah, no, they asked for it. And, Kamala Harris comes out and says, well, don't come. Right. And of course, they're going to listen. They can even hear what she's saying. Right. I mean, they're not sitting there, on their phones going, oh, well, Kamala said not to go. Let's go back.
Kamala Harris helped make one of the best memes of that year.
Yeah.
Too.
Look at these.
The reason
there were a
brought
bunch
up
of these.
The reason I brought up the African slave trades because the numbers padding that they're doing with the census, like what I erroneously said that they said all black people were worth 3/5 of a person in the eyes of God 2 nights ago. That's not what it was about.
It was
It was about the North trying to say, like, look, we're not going to let you pad your stats for the states with your slaves. We'll say they're worth 3/5 of a person each legally, just so we can
it was an
even
effort
out
to weaken slavery.
And so now we've got
the North said they're not voting people because they're slaves. The South said yes, they are. And then they agreed on 3/5.
Right. They were property. The South wanted to call them property, whatever. But now we've got people that are padding stats 1 for 1. They're not legal citizens. So what do we need? Another 3/5 clause? Do we need to say?
No. How about don't break the law?
Right.
How about just enforce the existing laws?
That right
Well,
there.
the problem is
that's it.
sanctuary states because existing law
That's illegal.
is
They're
different.
breaking the law.
It is illegal.
The federal government has, whether or not you agree with like open borders or not, currently the federal government is the organization charged with protecting the borders and enforcing border law. And they are completely and totally neglecting to do that.
Well, and I think you're seeing good signs come out of places like Texas where you have Governor Abbott, saying, if you're not going to do it, we're going to do it, and we're going to send the National Guard or send, the Texas Marshals down there to help enforce. But when you don't have a barrier, right? I mean, when you don't have something to keep them out in places because you can't put eyes on every inch of the border all the time, it's impossible. So the federal government is leaving this to the states, knowing that they probably can't handle it economically, and it absolutely is a plan, it's been working for a long, long time.
Sanctuary states basically means they're not part of the union. When California says we will not abide by union law, it's like, well, then why are you in any way tied to this union if you're not agreeing with the law?
Interposition.
Let me just play devil's advocate. What about the marijuana laws? Because you have 40 states now that have said that marijuana is legal, but the federal government says it's
agreed.
Not. I mean, it's interesting.
The federal government's got deep problems.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the idea of interposition where a state's supposed to step in and say, we supersede your federal law. Yeah. Which is technically the way the country works. So in that instance, California can say, yeah, even if you're acting xenophobic, we're going to let whoever we want.
Then Texas should have the right to deport. And the problem is, what we're hearing from border states is that they have no authority in deporting people.
Texas is deporting to New York and deporting to Florida.
All that's doing is putting illegal immigrants in deeper into the country and embedding them here.
Yeah.
They're helping Joe Biden and Democrats and convincing their voters they're helping their voters. So you get all these Republicans going like, yay, haha, it's so funny they're doing this. Meanwhile, Biden's like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
This is fantastic for us. We're gonna inflate our numbers in these jurisdictions, and New York is going to get more congressional votes. It's going to get more electoral college votes. Thank you, Texas. Thank you, Florida.
I do think that there is a little bit of risk in classifying all people that are migrants as automatically a Democrat voter, especially considering the push with LGBT issues, gender ideology. That's not going to fly with the Catholics coming up from South America.
No.
And also there's also a lot of people from a lot of different parts of the world now are coming through the U.S. border. I've heard about people from Syria and from Turkey already getting there because of the earthquake. So it's, as long as that border is open, there's going to be people from all over the world coming to South America and then making the trek up through Mexico. The remain in Mexico policy, or remain in whatever the safest country that you can get to, that's the correct policy. If you want to apply for asylum, that's it. That's the one to do. I think that we should have a much easier system for getting people to immigrate to the U.S. I think that I like the idea of open borders. I do think that there probably has to be some kind of immigration control, but overall, I think free people should be able to move wherever they want. But the system that we have now is not working at all.
When I'm thinking about the census, I think when you fill out the census, you don't have to put if you're a citizen. Is that right? Is that the way they changed it now? There's no is there a census or is there a citizen block and you can either say yes,
I remember
no,
there being
or
a
I
fight
don't have
over
to fill
that
it out?
in some places. but
Well,
I'm not
if
sure.
you don't put that you're a citizen, then your census count should be worth 3/5 of a person.
Or nothing. And Donald Trump tried getting that on the census, and they sued, and the Supreme Court said you can't do that.
They wanted to prevent him from forcing people to acknowledge that they weren't citizens. I'm just saying you don't have to acknowledge if you are or you're not, but if you don't acknowledge that you are, then your census should
He
count
wanted
for
to
less.
put the question on the census, and they blocked him, saying you can't.
Right, that's what it was.
I understand
Which is
that
insane.
because if people had to say no, then they'd just be a target for ICE.
Well, they wouldn't have filled it out.
So you're saying people who are here illegally breaking our laws should just be allowed to keep breaking our laws?
I don't personally feel like that, but that's, I think,
It's a ridiculous argument that it's like, well, if someone is committing serious felonies, we shouldn't force them to tell us. Yes, you should. The cops should find them and arrest them, and that's it.
Well, and if you aren't a citizen of the United States, you aren't necessarily protected by the Constitution.
You are.
Of the
You
United States.
absolutely are protected by the Constitution.
If you're not a citizen?
Yep. Constitution applies to anybody in this country. Doesn't matter if you're a citizen or not.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that. The issue, however, is if you are not a citizen of this country and you are here illegally or your visa. Yes,
Well, but then
because-
you have a right to not self-incriminate. You could plead the fifth, so to speak, right? Because
Right. So you get the census with the question on it and you don't fill it out.
No.
But the idea that you can't put the question on the census is insane. And the argument from the left was, well, then people who are not citizens won't fill it out and we'll get inaccurate readings. And it's like, so the people who are here illegally, we won't give federal funding to the people who aren't here illegally. I'm fine with that. If you're not here legally, you should not be receiving benefits in any way. California should not get a congressional seat because of illegal immigrants they let in and don't enforce the laws against.
Yep.
If the federal government, so this is the big problem. This is why I feel like the country is on the verge of blowing up, collapsing, whatever you want to call it. Texas has to abide by the votes of California when it comes to the federal government. But California is breaking the federal rules to strengthen itself. So imagine you got a roommate and your roommate is taking your stuff and selling it and then using that money to pay your rent or whatever. And you're like, yo, you can't do this. You're stealing my stuff, basically. Well, I pay more rent than you, so I get more say. California is breaking the rules, bringing people in, then arguing they should get more say than everybody else. Why would Texas or Florida want to be a part of a union that allows that?
That's it. I know that the national divorce question is huge right now. The thing that gives me pause about this, and I understand your question because it seems like it makes it impossible to work with each other. But I just want to remind everybody of what the woke mantra was in 2020. Right? It's disrupt and dismantle. Right? That was the whole thing. And it seems to me that the left has done a lot of disrupting, and they're leaving it to the right to dismantle a little bit. Where it's like, okay, we've disrupted all this stuff. Aren't you super mad at California? Well, then we need a national divorce. Because what I keep reminding people of is that, first of all, the more you talk about divorce, the more likely it is to happen. That's if you've ever been in marriage counseling or anything like that. But the other part of it is that the only thing that's keeping the global oligarchy from taking over completely, I believe, is the Constitution of the United States. And if you have a dissolution, if you have a divorce, the Constitution is gone. I mean, it is in effect gone. And so then we have a serious problem because then we've actually brought to the left what the left wanted in the first place because they disrupted and we dismantled. So I understand the sentiment and I know it's difficult, but we've been through worse times, right? But
The
it's
Constitution
hard.
is basically gone as it is because red states don't do anything. Republicans don't do anything. There has been a growing contingent of people, say the MAGA movement or whatever, who have been resisting. The establishment is freaking out, and they've been freaking out. But you take a look at Mitch McConnell, who, I love this, he was asked about Nord Stream. Who could have done it? And he goes, well, it certainly wasn't us, or something like that. It's like, oh yeah, okay, Russia blew up their own pipeline. No sane, rational person who pays attention to politics thinks that. But this is what they do. This is what they think of you and how they present quote unquote facts. So what does this mean for us if we have a constitution or otherwise? Are they infringing on our rights to free speech? Yes, every single day. Are they infringing on our right to keep and bear arms? Yes, incessantly. They even infringed on the Third Amendment with the COVID lockdowns by mandating that people who are in the U.S. Armed Forces could not be evicted. That violates the Third. Don't even get me started on the Fourth Amendment. Come on. Unwarranted search and seizure, the mass spying programs, Fifth Amendment. Dude, there are people who are locked up all the time. January 6th is a great example. The list goes on and on and on.
But do you think that the left is the only ones doing that? I mean,
That's why I'm saying it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
So the idea now is sit back and let California cheat and break the law and abuse people and let Democrats do it nationwide and riot and burn down buildings, or say no and get a national divorce?
I think that I think that a national divorce is a little too extreme. And I think that I made an argument on Twitter that at this point, I think convention of states is the only legal means to have a divorce. It's to actually dissolve with that, because the thing you were talking last night about the Civil War. The thing about the Civil War is they didn't have the states to call a convention, so that it was technically illegal, right? For the states to secede, because they couldn't actually make the amendment. If you call a Article 5 convention, you can actually amend the Constitution. It's not going to be easy, but it's a whole lot easier than living without electricity because we had a civil war.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.